welcome to Cell Specialization, CSEC Biology with Mr. Wilson, where life and environment is explained. Now, we're not going to be taking much time before we get into the lesson, but we want to say a big shout out to those guys in Guyana. We're seeing you too. Let's hop on right into the lesson. So today we are going to be looking at cell specialization. And some things we want to cover today. We really want to explain cell specialization. We want to also explain the importance of cell specialization in multicellular organisms. And then we want to illustrate the hierarchical layout of cells, tissues, organs, organ systems, organism, population, community, and of course, ecosystem. The last thing we want to look at, we're going to try to identify and explain examples of cells, tissues, and organs, etc. After which we are going to be looking at some practice questions. So let's get right into the meat of things. Cell specialization or cell differentiation, as it is called. What is it really? Now, by definition, it says that this is a special and of course unique process in multicellular organisms in which generic cells or stem cells develop or change to perform specific or particular function. I had a class this morning and this was a little too much for them to process. So I used the analogy. You would have gone to a restaurant, and in that restaurant you would have had persons who all went to school. At that time they were pretty much like general, or should we say stem cells. Now they grew and they became specialized. So you would have the waiter and you would have the cashier, and as you would accept, they have special function. Now the function of a chef would be to cook, exactly, while the waiter would be doing the serving. You wouldn't want to have your waiter in the kitchen cooking because he's just not specialized for that. Now the same is true for living things and cells. Cells are specialized to carry out specific functions. So too your chef and the waiter. Now, because cells are specialized, they have special names too. And there are many specialized cells, but today we're just going to be looking at some. We're going to be looking at those covered by the CSEC HSB syllabus for this particular lesson. So we are going to be looking at the red blood cell, white blood cell, epithelial cell, sperm cells, egg, and of course nerve cell and muscle cell. The syllabus really wants us to cover muscle cell, nerve cell, epithelial cell, sperm cell, and of course the ovum or the egg. Now the egg cell is not listed here, but we're going to be covering it later in this lesson. So remember that we're going to be covering the egg cell and of course the sperm cell. Now over on the plant side, there are a number of specialized cells that we have there. We have the xylem cell, the phloem cell, the root hair cell, the mesophyll cell, epidermal cell, parenchyma, and of course these might be a little more than you'd cover at CXC, the parenchyma, clarenchyma, and sclerenchyma. But of course there are those of us who'd love to do a little more reading. So let's look at the function of these specialized cells. Of course these cells are specialized to carry out specific function. And one would accept, or one can just imagine that the fact that they are specialized and have specific function, so too they would have had some structural modification, hence they all would look different. Now some function of these cells would include, for example, the red blood cell. The red blood cell is specially suited to carry oxygen. And its structural difference or the structural design, it is because it is what we refer to as a biconcave disc, which makes inside the middle of the cell looks pretty much like a donut. A depression is there and it would make oxygen very easy to diffuse into the blood. Then we have the nerve cell, and the nerve cell will be transmitting impulses from pretty much one place to another. Now, there are about 3 types of nerve cells that we are going to be covering on the HSB syllabus, and these 3 types of nerve cells are what we refer to as the sensory neuron, the connector neuron, and the motor neuron. Though it's early days yet, we still should expose you to another name for the red blood cell. The red blood cell is also called erectocyte. Now, the red blood cell is just one type of cell, one type of blood cell. So we would have what we refer to as the leukocyte, and under the leukocyte we would have the lymphocyte and the phagocyte, all of which we are going to be covering in this subject later on. Now, we have the sperm cell, and most persons can recall the sperm cell is pretty much a male gamete, and its chief purpose is for reproduction. On the other hand, we would have the egg cell or the ovum, which is pretty much responsible for reproduction as well, but that is going to be the female gamete. So the female gamete and the male gamete, be it the egg cell and the sperm cell, they usually fuse to produce new offspring in what we refer to as sexual reproduction. Muscle cell. Muscle cells, they are really beautiful. We have the smooth, the striated, and of course, when we talk about the cardiac muscle, that's the one that makes up the heart. But what makes muscle cells so unique and so wonderful is the fact that muscle cells are able to contract and relax, and when they do, they bring about movement. In order for me to be talking, then that's caused by the contraction and of course relaxation of muscle, and it causes some movement. Now, the epidermal cell. Now, this cell is not pretty unique to plants, or is it unique to animal? You'd find epidermal cell in both plants and animal, because the epidermal cell, they form the covering of the surfaces of our vital organs. So it's very important. Let's recap. You want to remember specialized cells, and there are 5 specialized cells that the syllabus for HSB, Human and Social Biology, wants us to know. These 5 cells are the epithelial cell, the sperm cell, the nerve cell, the muscle cell, and of course the egg cell. We want to ensure we understand, we want to ensure that we know these 5 cells, and we are able to talk about their structural makeup and function. We gave you a little extra by topping in some plant cells so that you can be on the ball. We never would like to know that our children or our students are thinking that only animals have specialized cells. So both plants and animal. But why are specialized cells important? Why are specialized cells important? Specialized cells are important because, of course, they ensure structural differences among cells. Structural difference, we spoke about that some time ago, and we said that a boat in comparison to a motor car, the structural difference is just pretty vivid. It's right in front of you. The boat does not have tires, however the motor car would have about 4 tires. Now the motor car, because of its structural design, it is able to travel on the road, and the motor car would not be seen traveling across the ocean. On the other hand, the boat does not have any wheels, so the boat would not be on the road unless it is supported by some other mechanism. However, you would always find the boat sailing across the water. There we have it. The structural differences allow these machines to do their special function, or we would say to carry out their special function. Let's look at number 2. Now, it's also important that cells become specialized so that identification is easier. Now, you really want to be able to identify your cells in order to make decisions. If we were supposed to look, for example, at a person who is having sickle cell, we would never want to say it's half of the nerve cell or half of the egg cell or half of the muscle cell that is sickle. We want to be sure that it is the red blood cell that we are talking about. So because cells are so specialized, we are able to identify where we're having the problem. A lot said just now. It might just be time for us to pause. But let's just look at the two other important points, and then I'm going to be throwing some questions to you, and we're going to be answering it very, very quickly. Number 3, cell specialization is important because it ensures functional difference among cells. It's important to have functional differences between cells because this increases the efficiency in which an organism can operate. Now, every cell will be carrying out its unique function, so there will be no bundling. One can talk about bundling where they say too many rats never usually dig a good hole. Now, the cells are not like that. They are pretty organized, and each cell will be carrying out its specific function. Now, 4, the structural differences ensure functional differences, which helps the organism to carry out its life process efficiently, and that was well ventilated when we looked at the motor car and the boat. So structural difference is very important because structural difference will always enhance functional differences. We want to pause right here, and your teacher might want to go over what we have done. So go get yourself a cup of water and let's come right back, because when we're back, we're going to be talking about what we have covered so far. Good, we're back. So let's go right into the lesson. Now, can anybody tell me what's cell differentiation? No. There is no need to panic. Cell differentiation is pretty much the same thing as cell specialization. So what is cell specialization? I'm sure you would know. So you can just check the front part of this video to ensure that that answer is correct. I want you to name me 5 specialized cells. 5 specialized cells, right? The egg cell, sperm cell, red blood cell, white blood cell, muscle cell, epithelial cell, egg cell, xylem cells, phloem cell, parenchyma, mesophyll, and the list goes on and on. I tell you guys, I know you'll be doing great today. Let us try something a little different. Let's try something a little different. I'm going to say the function and you are going to say the cell. So this cell is responsible for transporting oxygen. What is a red blood cell? This cell is specialized for fertilizing the egg, ensuring that the egg is fertilized. The sperm cell, you're so right. This cell is called the female gamete. Of course, that's going to be the egg cell. And this cell is also responsible for transmitting impulses. That is the nerve cell. What about the cell that is responsible for movement? The muscle cell. Guys, you are doing wonderful. You're doing great. Give yourself a round of applause. Wonderful. Let's move right on. We're going on to these specialized cells. So just now we spoke about them, but now we want to attach picture to them, and we want to look a little bit at the structure. So I want you to pay attention to the screen as is. So this is the red blood cell, and we spoke about that biconcave disc. If you look inside the cell here, there is a depression. Please be reminded the red blood cell has no nucleus. It is considered to be what we call a biconcave disc, and its core function is to transport oxygen. Wonderful. Then here we have the granulocyte. Granulocyte. Now this cell has a whole lot of name. It's just one of the white blood cell. It's called granulocyte. It's also called the phagocyte. It is a white blood cell, so you know its chief function is pretty much to defend the organism. So what happens is that when there is an ulcer, a bruise, a cut, that type of thing on the skin, what happens is that this type of cell, the granulocyte, would have quickly get to that area. And the core reason it's getting to that area is because it's going to engulf those foreign material. So here you're seeing it's engulfing the material. Now, to identify this cell usually has what we call a lobe nucleus. So here is the nucleus. It's called a lobe nucleus. And granulocyte it gets that name because of these thing here pretty much looking like a granule. Now, the white blood cell has more than one representation and operate differently. This type engulfs foreign matter. Then there's another type of white blood cell we call a lymphocyte. So if this cell here, the granulocyte, was supposed to go on some area of the body to control the foreign organism and it was not able to do so, then the other type of white blood cell would fill in, and that white blood cell is called the lymphocyte. Here we have this sperm cell, or we call it the male gamete. Now, it's very important that you understand the structural makeup. So this long area here is called a flagellum, and it's the tail. And then we have a middle area here, and in this middle area we're going to find the mitochondria, and it's the mitochondrion that is supplying energy. The mitochondrion that is supplying energy. Then next to the mitochondrion we have what is called the nucleus. So here's the nucleus, and right here is the mitochondrion, and all this area here would have been the flagellum. So the nucleus, of course, it is going to control what happens in this cell. And then we have at the tip the acrosome, and the acrosome contains enzyme that would be breaking down that pathway in order for the sperm to carry out its function. So all this area here of the sperm is referred to as the head. All this area here is referred to as the head. Then we have the ovum. It was not in our table, but here is the ovum, one of those cells that the syllabus, the HSB syllabus, wants us to look at. Now, the ovum is the female gamete, and there we have the labeling. You have some follicle that provide protection for the cell. Then we have the cytoplasm and of course the nucleus. And we have ventilated on the cytoplasm and the nucleus so many times. Then here we have the smooth muscle cell. The smooth muscle cell contains nucleus, and there we have the membrane. A wonderful cell, I think it is, and we do recall that the muscle cell is responsible for carrying out movement. Here we have another type of muscle cell, and this one, if you observe, it has some what we refer to as dark coloration and light coloration, and a whole lot of nucleus. So many cells to learn. At any time you can go back to whatever point of the video you so desire and listen the content again. Here we have the nerve cell, and the nerve cell is made up of dendrites, nucleus, cell body, axon, and myelin sheath. The axon is supposed to carry the impulses from one point to another, while the myelin sheath provide insulation. Now, a whole lot we'll be talking about this cell as soon as we get to sensitivity and coordination. It's important to know that there are about 3 types of this cell. You have what we call the motor neuron, the sensory neuron, and of course the intermediate neuron. All those you'll be seeing in this subject. Here we have what is called the epithelial cell. This is called the epithelial cell. Now, the epithelial cell, there we're identifying the cell membrane, the cytoplasm, and the nucleus. Remember, we said that the epithelial cell forms the covering of our organs. Nicely put. The root hair cell. The root hair cell is found in plant, and remember that the epithelial cell is found in both plants and animals. Now, here we have the root hair cell. Wonderful cell. And here we have what is called strong solution. In this area here, we are going to have strong solution, the sap inside of the plant, and on the outside here we are going to be having what we refer to as weaker solution, probably water and mineral salts. And here this labeling would have been, of course, your root hair. So the root hair cell is very important to the plant because it takes up water and mineral salt, which is really needed for the plant's survival. Then we have the xylem cell. Now the xylem cell is usually highly lignified. It is a dead cell, and the xylem cell also is hollow. It is pretty much a pathway through which water and mineral salt will travel, having left the root here. Wonderful day, I think it is. I do hope that we are doing fine. Please be reminded that at any time you can go through this video again, however many times you so desire. Now we are going to be looking at the hierarchy of cells, tissue, organ, organism, and so on and so forth. We want you to have a good grasp of why are cells important? Where do we go from cells, and of course where we are going to end up. Now I'm going to be going through all the colors, but just let's go one at a time. We're going to be looking at the white area first. So we're saying that a number of cells, in some cases they are different cells, they come together to form what is called a tissue, right? And then a number of tissues, sometimes different types of tissue, because we spoke about the heart, and if you were supposed to talk about the heart, you could talk about the epithelial tissue, and you could talk about the muscle and all of that. So a different type of tissue will come together to form organs, and then different types of organs will come together to form what we call an organ system, and then different organ system is of course going to make up the organism. And then we might have many organisms within the same species making up a population. And then we might have different populations coming together, and there would have a wonderful community. Just let me pause here. Please, for your biology exam, if you're asked to define or asked to explain what makes up a community, it is not the same community as you would have done in social study. Please confine your answer to that of science. Then we would have our community interacting with the abiotic component of the environment, the water, the soil, edaphics, all that bit, to form what we refer to as an ecosystem. So let's go again. Cells will combine to form tissue, tissue will combine to form organs, organs will combine to form organ system, and organ system combine to form organism. Organism, of course, many organisms is of the same species, they are going to form a population, and different population will come together to form what we call a community. Now a community interacting with its abiotic component will form what is called an ecosystem. Now let us look at the examples. If we were looking at animals, we could look at the blood cell. Now the blood cell will come together with other types of cell to form the blood, which of course is a tissue. So the blood is a tissue in itself. The blood is a connective tissue. Then we would have other types of cell coming together to make up the heart. So the heart will be made of different type of tissue. We spoke about the muscle tissue, we spoke about the epithelial tissue, we spoke even about the blood, because the heart can't function without the blood. And then the organ heart will come together to form organ system, and then we talk about the circulatory system, and we should have an appreciation that the circulatory system is made of blood vessels, the heart, and so on and so forth, valves and that type of a thing. So we have an organ system there. Then we have an organism. The organism is made up of many organ systems. You would have the circulatory system, the respiratory system, the digestive system, the excretory system, and it goes on and on and on. Even the largest one that we could think about, the integument system, that is the skin, is also one of those systems that would come together to make the organism. Then we have a population. We have the human population. Now, one thing about a population, it is usually organisms of the same species. And then from that population, we could have different populations. So we could have a population of human, we could have a population of bird, cattle, goats, sheep, that type of thing. And all that living together would refer to that as a community. Now this community, like we said, interacting with all the abiotic means non-living component of the environment. It doesn't refer to things that are dead. It just refers to things that are just not alive, like the soil. The soil is not alive, right? So the community would be all those things interacting with the abiotic component. Then we need to look at plants. You might have the root hair cell, and the root hair cell, of course, is going to be connected to the xylem cell, and a number of cells is, of course, going to make the tissue. And the tissue here for the plant is going to be the xylem tissue. An organ for the plant is going to be the leaf. And then you have the transport system, where you have nutrients being transported, or what we refer to as translocation, being transported from the leaf to other parts of the plant, and water and mineral salt from the root to other parts of the plant. And then an organism, we could think about a coconut tree, a mango tree, ackee tree. I don't know what type of tree you want to think about in your locality, but whatever tree you're thinking about, it is an organism. And then this tree, for example, my coconut tree, if you were supposed to have a lot of orange, you'd call it an orange orchard. So you'd have a whole lot of trees. So there would have a population of trees, right? Because they're of the same species. And then now this population interacting with some breadfruit tree, some pear, some apple, human, some cattle, some sheep, goats, that type of thing, that would make up our community. And then of course the community interacting with everything that I like to call geography: the wind, the rain, the water, the soil, the topography, that type of thing. All that would make up your ecosystem. That brings us to our question, and we want you to suggest the importance of cell specialization. That's your first question. Tell us, what is the importance of cell specialization? Why is it important? Name 5 specialized cells found in animals and give the function of each. Complete the table to show organs that are associated with the cell. So we have organs and we have cell. Complete the table to show the association. Identify the cell below and state its function. Identify this cell as well and state its function. Identify this cell just the same and state its function. Identify this cell and state its function. That brings us to the end of the lesson for today. It was a very quick lesson. I want you to go over this lesson however many times you so decide. I want you to get yourself a pen, a paper, and as you go through this lesson, I think you'll be going a little slower than I did. I want you to write down these key points. I want you to write down 1. What is cell differentiation? I want you to write down 2. Why is it important? And 3, for your notes, I want you to give me at least 5 examples of cells being differentiated or cells being specialized. Having done that, I want you to give me the function of these cells as they become specialized. Having given the function, I want you to point out the structural differences between these cells. In pointing out the structural differences, you could draw, annotate, and label. Alright, so the structural difference you could draw to show some structural differences, and you could explain what you have drawn, what makes it different, and what makes it so ideal to carry out its function. Please be reminded, our next class we are going to be looking at diffusion. This would have been our final lesson in cells. The fact that we have done cells already, we have done microbes as already, and now we are covering cell specialization. So of course, the next step on our journey at grade 10 for HSB and biology will be diffusion. I also want you to remember to check out Mr. Chen's teaching. Mr. Chen's teaching, I'm going to be leaving a link in the description below. Until next time, walk good.